It's an honor to be invited to present to you all, and it's a pleasure to be able to talk about something that I really think is important, which is career planning by using a structured approach. I've been at UCSF for a long time, like Harinder said, and part of my job is meeting one-on-one with our graduate students and postdocs. And over the years, I don't have a current count, but I know that I've met with more than 1,500 of our graduate students and postdocs as they've figured out how to move on from their biomedical PhD training programs. And so I've had lots of stories. I've seen lots of stories as people have set a career counseling appointment with me and then come back and let me know how things are going, and sort of now following people as alumni. And I think of all the workshops that I've developed and taught, I think this topic, which is starting early to create a useful career plan, something we call an individual development plan, or IDP, is by far the most important thing that I teach. And so I really believe that this works for a lot of people. I've seen a lot of our students and postdocs at UCSF go through this process and say, now I get it, why people are wanting me to do an IDP. And you'll hear me say several times during the workshop that that an IDP should be more than just your research plan. You should have a long-term goal towards it. So what are you doing this year in order to reach your long-term goals is really what an IDP should be about. So we're going to talk about, I'll actually sort of take you through the process of using a structured stepwise approach to making rational career decisions about your career options. I'm sure you all know that there are a lot of different career paths you can follow. We'll talk about some of those in the next couple hours. I think avoiding the default postdoc, for those of you who are students, is a really important thing. We'll talk more about that later also, but I'm always disappointed when a student comes in our office and, like, I'm graduating next month and I haven't thought about what I'm going to do, so I guess I'm going to do a postdoc. And sometimes that turns out great. Sometimes they look back at the end of the postdoc then and say, the job that I ended up going into didn't actually require a postdoc, and so was that a really useful use of my 3 to 5 years as a postdoc? So part of this whole process is, if you can think about what you want to do as a career path when you finish your training, and you can plan for it in a structured way, you're going to be better off. And then we'll also work through the individual development plan process, and you'll begin your own IDP. And as Harinder said, this is a 2-part workshop, so you'll leave the second part of the workshop with a pretty solid IDP created. And we'll learn about using features of the myIDP model. There's lots of different ways you can do an IDP. I think the myIDP tool, which is at Science Magazine's careers site, is probably the most structured format. I know it doesn't work for everybody, and so at the end of today or the beginning of the next time I come, we'll talk about some different formats you can use as well. So I'd like for everybody to just start out the workshop by answering this question. What's your current career goal? And don't make it like, my current career goal is to finish that next set of experiments or to get to that conference this year. When you finish your training, plus a few years out, what do you want your job type or job title plus environment to be? And I need you to write that down, because for the next hour and 40 minutes, you're going to be coming back to that, what that career is multiple. So examples might be, I want to be a PI or tenure track faculty, large research university, teaching research faculty, state college, industry researcher in a drug development company, policy expert in the federal government. And if you don't know, that's kind of what this whole workshop's about. But in order to experience this process of career decision-making using data about yourself, you need to start with something. So take your best guess. The second question I have for you to write down an answer towards is, how confident are you that this career path is the best fit for you? A would be, I'm very confident. B is, I'm fairly confident. And C is, I'm still considering a range of options. So now you should have your future job and the environment you want to do that future job in, and your confidence level written down. And sometimes in this workshop, I've done this workshop more than 50 times at different places, probably more like 100 times. Sometimes we do a quick survey of confidence levels. all the time. It comes out somewhere between 70 and 90% of the people say, I'm still considering a range of options. And this is across training levels. If I have a whole group of only postdocs, only graduate students, I've worked with clinical fellows who have MDs and are trying to figure out what research type career they want to go into. It seems like regardless of the type or level of training, people don't report a great deal of of confidence in their future careers. And that's really why we started this workshop. We started looking at the outcomes of our graduate students and postdocs, so what happens to them after they finish, and what their career interests were. So what do they actually do and what do they want to do? And we started reporting that data. You can find this at our postdoc website at UCSF. These are approximate numbers because we report them year by year, but it's pretty consistent across the years. About 30% of our postdocs wind up being tenure track faculty. About 20% wind up doing other research or teaching jobs in academia. They may combine research and teaching in a non-tenure track position, maybe staff scientist, et cetera. About 20% wind up doing research in industry. About 5% are still postdocs 5 years after separation, so that's good. At least they're not doing multiple postdocs. And then 15% across a wide variety of types of careers. A small number are unknown. Almost no one is unemployed. So PhD level unemployment, super low, even given our current United States low unemployment standards. So everyone gets a job, but everyone might not get the job they thought they were going to get. For those people who are international postdocs, another thing that we found that when we started looking at our postdoc outcomes, or those of you who are international students also, for postdocs, more than half of them stay in the U.S. after their UCSF training. And an interesting thing was, students or postdocs and our international students come in our office all the time and like, I've heard it's almost impossible to get an industry job in the U.S. if I need visa support, and that seems not to be true. About half of those who stay in the U.S. Wind up getting industry jobs. So happy to talk to you all about that later. But we've gotten some really interesting data by just looking at what our postdocs and students do after they leave. We also have been asking them about their career interests. So what do you want to do? And when the question was, if you could only pick one career path right now, what would you like? What do you think it should be? About 45% of our students, 53% of our postdocs said they would want to be that PI in an academic setting, but about 30% of those folks got that job. A smaller number said they wanted to do other research, like non-PI research in an academic setting. About the same number that want to do industry research get those jobs, so that's encouraging. And then you can see how these are arrayed across a variety of other different types of careers. One thing that I think is relevant to the topic of this workshop today is that when we ask students this question and postdocs this question, they said, I don't want to report one outcome only, or one interest only. I'm thinking about many things at once, and this is not clear, but the point of this slide is 72% of them said they are thinking about being a PI in industry, but they're also thinking about other things. And when we made them choose one, for our students anyhow, they said 45% said, if I could only choose one, it would be a PI. So there's a lot of uncertainty about what they want to do. A lot of our students said, I don't want to do a postdoc if I don't have to in order to get that next role. In other words, if my next job doesn't require that I've done a postdoc, why would I go do that job? But I don't know how to decide about any one career option, and I'm not sure which one is best for me. And that's really what started this whole IDP process for the 4 people who worked on this. Is we saw some of this data, and we're like, we need to help students figure out where they're headed and how they're going to get there, because there's a lot of uncertainty, and the next career decision point is really an important one for you all. All this to show that it's important to think about your careers and feel more confident. We also have some data that I won't show today that said when students do pick a career and report more confidence and start moving towards that, in the direction of their dreams, their training goes better, they find themselves more satisfied with their graduate programs and their whole overall UCSF experience. And so I think there's a lot of reasons to take a careful, structured approach to deciding what you're going to do next and making a plan for how you're going to get there. So this is a list of careers which I know you can't read, but it's at myIDP, the myIDP website. When we started looking at career outcomes and started categorizing them, we found generally 20 categories of career paths that PhD level biomedical sciences typically go into. And then if you break them down to job titles, there was like 58 different job titles. And so when we started showing these to our students, they were like, this is awesome. It's so encouraging to see that there's so many things I could do. And at the same time, it's kind of daunting because how do I pick from so many different options when a lot of our students said, sort of came into graduate school thinking there's only one outcome, which is being a PI like my PI. So they recognize a need to make a career decision and move toward it and prepare for that. At the same time, they're like, I'm not sure how to work through all this information. And when we did these surveys of our students, some themes came out. They said, my research training, does a good job of teaching me to be a researcher, but it doesn't necessarily teach me about careers. And it shouldn't really be your PI's job to tell you about what it's like to be an intellectual property attorney. But if I want to find more information about career options, I don't know where to find it. I don't know how to select from among the different career paths. And I want to gain confidence that one option is better than the other, but I don't have a way to even think about making those decisions. I know that my research training is built around mentoring relationships and sort of the apprentice model where my role models are my PIs and my advisors. But if I'm going to go be a medical science liaison, how do I find new role models and new people who will help me move through my career? How do I build that network? And then I think there's a misperception sometimes that it's really hard to be a PI and every other job is easy. And I think that's what our students and postdocs also have found is not true, is that if I can get the skills and experience I need to move quickly into a career path that I've decided on while I'm still in training, that's going to be beneficial. If not, it might be really hard to get that job as a medical science liaison because I haven't prepared myself for that career path while I was still in training. So I think the best solution that we could come up with for answering all of these problems is to take a structured approach to your career planning and your goal setting, and that's called an IDP, or an individual development plan. And IDP creation is both a process and it should wind up being a product. And I think regardless of the model you end up using to create your IDP, and we'll talk about several models, generally they sort of fall into some self-assessment or reflection, what you've done, what are the things that you want to, the values, considering your skills, values, and interests. So if you think about your future career, what tasks do you want that career to involve that you're going to be good at, that you like to do? We talk about values, meaning the rewards or outcomes that you want from your work. So what is it that you want to do and on a daily basis, and what do you want it to give for you, to produce for you? And then taking a finite set of careers and learning about those careers with this information you have in mind, based on my skills, my values, and my interests, what careers might be the best fit for me. And this learning process can take a long time, but is really rewarding. And then once I've made a decision for where I'm going to head, let me set some goals for how I'm going to get there, some action items for what I will do in the next year to do this. And then I'm going to implement my plan, hopefully with the help of mentors, and do this on an annual basis so that you can move in the direction you need to go into. It really, I think this is the part that I think is missing in a lot of IDP concepts. So I saw a number of you raised your hands that you've been doing IDPs. The NIH, which funds a lot of your research, kind of requires IDPs to be done if you're being funded by NIH money. But I think what a lot of individual development plans turn out to be is a set of tasks that you're going to do in the lab during the next year. And what I think a good IDP should answer is two different questions. One is, where am I going with my career? And the other one is, how will I get there? We have some preliminary data that shows students' perceptions of the IDP process without having sort of some instruction about what it is are very negative. And once they go through some kind of workshop, they're like, oh, now I understand what I'm supposed to do and how I'm supposed to do it in order to create this plan. The perception of the value of the IDP process really goes up. So today we're going to talk mostly about this first piece and we're going to take a look at the career path that you wrote down a few minutes ago, and you're going to make an assessment about your skills, values, and interests in light of that, in the context of that career path. And we'll talk about how to learn more about that career path or others. And then the next time we're going to work more on this, how will I get there, and how do I talk to my mentors or my PIs about career planning and what I want to do next. So I mentioned this IDP, creating an IDP as a process, a sort of four-phase process. It should also be a product in the end, and it should be a written list of goals mapped onto a timeline, and those goals should lead to a desired career outcome. And the major goal areas should be reached through some sort of set of action plans. So you can see, in this person, this is a real IDP of someone who wanted to go into industry research. You can see that she had some month-by-month action items in order to help her collect data and analyze her X-ray structure. And then so your IDP should be a mix of goals about your research. That is true. But you can see that a lot of the other items here are about developing skills, learning about industry. So she's like, I think I want to go to industry, but I don't know that much about it. So I'm going to do some reading and meet with other people. In order to do that, I'm going to develop some of my research skills, and I'm going to make progress towards the product of my research, which should be papers and conferences. So she kind of divided up that way, and then had sort of month-by-month goal or month-by-month action items in order to reach those. A sheet like this, you should be able to do in a couple hours a year, but this deciding where you want to head in the desired career outcome part can be a lot more time-consuming. So a couple hours a year seems like it should be worth it, kind of makes sense, but there's actually some data that shows that it could make a big difference for you if you do some career planning and make a plan. There was a postdoc survey now 14 years ago in 2005 by a scientific society called Sigma Xi, and they did a really robust look at postdocs across disciplines. 7,600 postdocs responded, and they were looking at what variables are correlated with the satisfaction of the postdoctoral experience, how postdocs rated their advisors, who reported the least lab conflicts and the most productivity. And after they did all the controls, they found out that the single thing that had the greatest impact on success and satisfaction was, did the postdoc have a written plan? That was just the question. They didn't say, was it a research plan or career plan? But if you did some sort of planning process, you tended to be more productive, 30% more authored papers, 25% more grant proposals, higher satisfaction, and they rated their advisors higher. So if you can get all that from a couple hours a year, it seems like it should be worth it to go through this process. So we're going to jump into this first part, the where am I going with my career. And we'll start with this idea of self-assessment, where we'll have you consider your skills and values and interests. And the definition of these three things are, skills and interests are both about the tasks that are involved in a job. Skills are tasks that you're good at doing or not good at doing. Interests would be the tasks involved in a job that you like to do or you find engaging, or things that you find total drudgery and you hate. So some jobs are going to have both of those. And then, importantly, values are the rewards or outcomes that result from your work or the career path that you've chosen. And the idea of career satisfaction is that if you can find a job where the tasks that you go to work at every day are tasks that you are pretty good at, and there's not too many tasks that you're not good at, The tasks that comprise that job that you go to every day are tasks that you like to do, and there's not too many things that you find distasteful or drudgery, and that all those tasks that you do every day at work produce the rewards or outcomes you most want, you're going to be happy with your job. It makes a lot of sense. But most of the people I talk to report that they've never actually sat down and made a list of these things and ranked their skills, values, and interests in a way that they could then use as data to make a decision about the career options that are being presented to them. So we're going to spend a little bit of time doing that today, and then talking about what makes it, how these make a difference in your career planning. And we'll start with values. And I have a worksheet for you. If you've done the myIDP tool, this is the same list that's on the myIDP website. So I'll ask you to go through this list and circle the number from 1 to 5 according to how important that outcome or reward is in your future career. So in my future career, if you must have that thing, then it's a 5. Like, you would not pick that career without a 5. Try to go for a relatively even distribution, and we suggest it's hard to make career decisions when you have like more than 6 or 8 5s. I'm going to move on to some instructions for the next step by telling you a quick sort of case study or story about a postdoc that I worked with who was experiencing what we called a disconnect in her values. So if a career path that you're thinking about is a career path that you'd be good at and you would like it, so it's a skills and interest alignment, but it doesn't produce the rewards or outcomes you want, then I would call that like that career path is like a disconnect for you in terms of values. And so the story was, it was one of our postdocs who was close to finishing. Her spouse was also a postdoc at UCSF, but he was a couple years behind her. They were sort of feeling the money crunch because they wanted to start a family, and San Francisco was ridiculously expensive, even with 2 postdoc salaries. And so they decided that Teresa was going to hurry up and finish and get a job that pays a lot more than a postdoc, and then they could start having kids and being able to afford it. And so she did what you should do when you're job hunting, and she started telling everybody, hey, I'm going to be looking for a job, and networking, and pretty soon somebody that was a tech salesperson for the microscopes they were using in her lab told her that, hey, our firm's going to be hiring. You're really skilled with this microscope, the kind of microscope, you should come work for us. And she applied for the job and did great in the interviews and got an offer. And there was something kind of bothering her, and she'd done this values worksheet, and she looked back at her top 3 values, and it was help others, help society, and family friendly. And she was like, I'm sure selling microscopes helps others and helps society in some way, but I need a little more direct connection if I'm going to be happy in my career. But mostly, this was a job that represented like the whole Western United States, or like west of the Rockies, and she was like, I'm going to be on the road 40%. I don't know how I can be the kind of parent I want to be and be on the road that much. And so it was a hard decision because the job was going to pay a lot, and that was the reason that started her on this path in the first place. But she ended up turning down the job and staying another few months on the job market before she found a job at an East Coast pharmaceutical company where her work was sort of downstream in the drug development process, and she could actually see patients who were going through trials and seeing how the product that she was working on was helping people, find cures. And so this was 9-to-5 job. She could clearly see the helping others and help society component of what she was doing. And so this was a way that she recognized a values disconnect with her future job that she was thinking about, and made a course correction so that she could find a job that was more suitable for her values and something that she was good at and liked to do. So what I'd like for you to do is take a moment and look at your values list that you just filled out, and think about your values list in the context of that career path that you wrote down at the workshop, at the beginning of the workshop. So I want to be, and try to answer these questions, given the values that you thought about and the stated career path that you wrote at the beginning of the workshop, what's a values disconnect that you might experience because you hold that value to be important for you, and then what's a potential solution to that disconnect or challenge. So for me, it might be, if I was going to say I want to be a high school science teacher in the future after I finish my PhD, but my top related value was, I think it's called high earnings potential. And unfortunately in the US, science teachers don't make a ton of money. And so that would be a values disconnect. And maybe I think, well, one potential solution would be, I could be a principal someday, and administrators make more money than teachers, so maybe that's a solution. You can think of a little more deeply than that maybe. But try to answer these questions for yourself really quickly, and then we'll move on. Use disconnect idea is process it a little bit with a partner. You all probably maybe know each other, if not, do introductions. And then tell your partner what career path you're considering. It's a value that you ranked as most important. Disconnect that you might face because you have that value, the solution that you came up with. But then importantly, ask your partner what's another potential solution to that challenge. So I tell my partner I might be a principal in the future, and my partner says, well, then you wouldn't be teaching anymore. So that's the whole thing you wanted to do. That's kind of an issue. Maybe you could keep your teaching job and find a summer job that pays a ton of money, and you'll make lots of money because teachers don't have to teach during the summer if you're a high school teacher. So maybe try to think a little more deeply than that with your partners. But as I said, I've done this workshop lots of times, and this is the part that everybody says they find surprising, that they had such useful discussions with partners, and that they wanted more time to do this. So I'll try to give you a few minutes to process that. It works best if you can get into. Come back to some more activities like that shortly. But what I'd like for you to do next is take a look at the skills assessment that we just passed out. And this is ranking yourself from 1 to 5 on a large number of tasks that are typical of science-related careers. And just try to answer these first two questions with this survey, which is which of these tasks you're good at doing, which you're not good at doing. Some of them you can leave blank. There's one about how good is your skill at working with animals, and if you don't work with animals, you can just leave it blank. But try to use, for a comparison group, try to use your peers. So if someone's thinking that, I think there's one about how presenting your science to other scientists. If you're comparing yourself to your world famous PI who's flying around the globe presenting every week, you're like, I'm not that good. But if you give a lab meeting, you're like, I'm pretty good compared to my peers, then maybe that's a 4 or something like that. So I know everybody's still working on the skills list, but I'm passing out the interests assessment as well. And just remember when you do this one, so when you're done with the skills one, jump to the interest one and try to complete that one as well. Remember that interest and skills differ because interests are tasks that you like to do or don't like to do. Skills are tasks that you are good at or not good at. I think most people are back. So we'll sort of move on. I think almost everyone's done with their interest and skills inventories. I'd like to have you think a little about what this means in terms of career decision making. So if you remember, skills and interests are both about the tasks that a job is composed of. Skills are things you're good at doing or not. Interests are things you like doing or not. It's possible that those don't fit together, right? Sometimes we're good at tasks that we don't like to do. And that can be kind of a problem if that task is like a big chunk of the job. You're good at it, but the whole job becomes drudgery pretty quickly. Sometimes we like doing tasks, or we think we'll like them in the future, but we're not good at it. And you all are really smart people. You can probably fix that problem by becoming better at a skill. And a lot of what we'll talk about maybe at the end of the day or the next time is setting goals to become better at different tasks, skills. But if there's a job that you're thinking about doing in the future and you're like, a big chunk of this job is stuff that I don't like to do and I'm terrible at it, why would you pick that job, right? And yet sometimes if you don't make a thoughtful career decision, you can fall into something like that. And so that's why I think it's useful to just start thinking about breaking down jobs into specific tasks and knowing what you like and don't like and what you're good at and not good at doing so you can plan around that. What I'd like for you to do now is think and write again. What common tasks involve skills you need to improve in order to be successful in that future job? So go back to the job you wrote down at the beginning and look for skills disconnects. So what am I going to have to be better at if I want to actually be good at this job? So I wrote down that I want to be a PI at a big research university, but I'm not very good at writing grants because I've actually never done that yet. That's going to be an issue I'm going to have to improve at. What might I do around that? And what common tasks are you good at doing but you don't enjoy? So I have written some grants and I really hate it. I know that being a PI at a big research university is going to be a lot of grant writing. Is that the best career path for me? So that would be about an interest disconnect around grant writing in the context of being a PI. Even if you're not completely done with this, try to jump back into your pairs and discuss these issues with a partner. For the skills disconnect, share one disconnect that you have because I want to be a PI in the future and I'm not good at grant writing. I'm going to have to improve that skill. And then talk about how you might do that. Maybe I'll take a grant writing course. And then ask your partner for another idea. Like maybe the partner says, next time you write a grant in your lab, maybe you could offer to do a section of it or do a fellowship when you weren't thinking about it next year. Interest disconnect, same thing. A potential solution to that challenge and ask your partner for another solution. We'll move on to the next step of this process. But first I'd like everybody to think a little bit about why we did this. Some students have asked, why do we look at all these negative things about how a career might not be a good fit or might not make me happy or might not be good at? I think there's actually some useful lessons to learn from this process, which is probably pretty easy to see. No career option is going to be perfect. There's going to be tasks that you need to improve at in order to be good at that career. There's going to be some tasks that you don't like doing. No career is going to give you every reward or outcome that you want. And the process of career decision making, really, in picking out which career is best for you and figuring out which, having confidence about your future path, is to take a look at these options and figure out how you're going to deal with those challenges if you stay in that career path, or move on to another career option. And how awesome it is to do that now while you're still in training, rather than 10 years from now where you've gone down a certain path and you're like, I wish I had thought about how this might not be good for me in the past. So good for you for thinking about this now. I think another takeaway lesson, hopefully, and I think this happened in this room because you guys were really engaged, was realizing how helpful your colleagues can be in this process. And it seems like in science training, we don't talk a lot about career options and what we're going to do in the future. It's all about like getting the next research project done. But hopefully you'll find it useful in the future, and maybe over time we can kind of change the culture of how we do science training and think about long-term things as well as short-term things. So what you've done right now is begun the process of career decision making by taking a look at your skills, values, and interests, and generating this data about yourself, and then taking a look at one career option and thinking about how it might or might not be a good fit for you. And the process of career decision making in general then would be to develop other career options, and maybe you could use the list at myIDP, which we'll talk about in a minute, or just start out with the careers that you can think of. And then learn enough about those careers, we call it career exploration, learn enough about each of those so that you can put a focus on your skills, values, and interests, and think about whether that career path is going to be a good fit for you or not. And if it's not, eliminate that career path and move on to another one. And what I find is that when I've been working with people one-on-one or in groups, as they iterate through this process, they start to the answers start to fall out. Like, here's a career path that I think is not going to be perfect, but is the best path for me to shoot for next. And And this becomes a skill. It seems probably difficult to do right now or a little fuzzy, but the more you'll do it, the more you go through this process, the more you'll find it useful and easier. So one of the things that kind of hangs people up at this point, though, is how do I learn enough about these careers so that I can actually make a intelligent assessment based on my skills and values and interests, because I actually don't know what it's like to be a medical science liaison or a science policy expert. And so we'll talk about, in the next 30 minutes here, we'll talk about the career exploration process, and then I actually have an assignment for you that our students and postdocs seem to find really enjoyable and useful, to dig out some information about some careers that are on your potential list. So the first step, self-assessment. The second step, career exploration, which is learning about the different career options that are available to you and start eliminating the options that are not a good path for you. And then once you make a decision, move on to the goal setting part for how you're going to get there. Like I said, students ask us, I'm supposed to do career exploration. I don't even know where to start. I don't know what process to go through to learn about my options. And so we'll take you through that. And I think if you go to the myIDP website, which I have a link at the end, it's just at the Science Magazine's careers site. And you can actually go through this whole process we've been doing today online. And you can fill out the skills, interests, and values assessment. And then the tool will actually give you a career list based on your unique skills and interest responses. And the list is ordered according to what the order that the tool is suggesting that you start exploring careers in. And so for this person, science policy was an 85% skills match and a 79% interest match. You can see that there's not a lot of difference between some of these. And so for someone to say, myIDP says I'm supposed to be a science policy person and not a science education person, that's not what it's saying, because like 1% difference on a skills match, right? So a couple things come up when people see this list, and if you've done myIDP, maybe you have these questions already. One question that often comes up is where we got this data and how we do the match. And the process was when we wrote this tool in 2012, we gathered information from science career experts. There were 20 people that we surveyed who were like career advisors for scientists. And we asked them to fill out the same sheets that you filled out, only instead of just saying how good they were at skills or interests or how much they liked that skill, we asked them for the skills list for each of the 20 career paths represented in these lists. How good do you have to be at each of those 45 tasks in order to be successful at that career? So there were whatever 20 times 45 is 900, is that right? There's a lot of data points. And then we gave them the interest list and we asked them how frequently is that task performed in that career. And so likewise, I think there's 40 some interest on the list. So they had another 900 matches or ratings to do. And so we didn't ask how much they like those tasks. We said, how often is that task done? Because you can assume that if a task is required a lot in that career, that you should like doing it. And then we hired a statistician, several statisticians, to put together an algorithm that would sort of produce this prediction. It is not a perfect tool. It's not intended to say this is a career you should look at and this is a career you shouldn't look at. It's intended to just be a place for you to start your career exploration, because there's so much information to learn that our career experts are saying that this person might want to start reading and learning about science policy careers first, because it's likely that they're going to like that career better than something that's down farther in the list. Pretty commonly, students come in the office and they'll say, I actually do want to be a PI, and being a PI is like 19th out of the 20 categories on the list. Is the tool wrong, or am I in the wrong career? And we're like, maybe neither of those. Let's take a look at one thing that is kind of easy to miss. These are actually links. And if you click on the skills match or interest match, it'll pop up. So in this case, if this were this person who came in and said, it says science policy or science education, and I actually thought I wanted to be a PI, you can click on the skills and interest match for being a PI and for this person, and you can see how the student's rating was different from the expert's rating. And so this person rated themselves, on experimental design, and the experts were like, if you're going to be a PI, you should be close to a 5 out of 5 on experimental design, statistical analysis. You're going to need to do some improvement there. It doesn't mean you should be a PI, but it gives you some ideas of where you might want to start improving. The interest list, likewise, would show some disconnects between what the experts said were common tasks in that career and what the person said they like to do. Does that make sense? So definitely it's not supposed to say don't be a PI or whatever. It's just to say here's some differences from where our experts said you might want to be. So what to do with this information if you're trying to learn about careers. The point of showing this information is just like this is a place where you might start to think about career paths that might be a good fit for you. And then start learning about those in the order that they are presented perhaps. And I think one fast way to start learning about careers is to use the myIDP list of articles and books and professional organizations. So if you go to the next step in the navigation bar and click on the Read About Careers button, you'll get a list, the same list of careers in the same order that was on the career fit page. Only instead of these percent matches thing, you'll get a little link that says read more. For example, if you're like, well, science writing's up there, that sounds kind of cool, but I actually don't know the difference between science writing and medical writing and technical writing. You could click on the Read More button, and there are some, articles of, first-person articles of people who are in those different fields. So in a half hour, you could answer that question about what are those differences, because people have written in and said what they do in those different fields. Likewise, there's some book chapters that you might want to track down, and a lot of fields, the professional societies have career information on them. So Medical Writers Association has a whole bunch of career information for how you get into these careers and what they're like in medical writing. So link to the professional association for that career path and see what you can learn. I think a really, really useful thing for finding out about careers is LinkedIn. And people think about LinkedIn as the place where you post information about yourself and the employment world comes to see you. How many people have a LinkedIn profile so far? Awesome, great. And there's a LinkedIn workshop on November 6th where you can learn to improve your profile. This is sort of, what I'm suggesting is sort of a backwards way to use LinkedIn, and actually you could do this without a LinkedIn profile, which is start answering questions that you have about these careers. So suppose a question I get a lot is how I want to be in leadership in a biotech company or in industry. How long do I have to actually do research before I can become a leader? Find 10 people who have director titles at biotech companies and look what their career histories are and find out for yourself what are the trends that you see. So in this person, Gayatri, she's now a director at Biogen. But if you start reading backwards through her career history, you can see she did some of her training in India and then came to St. Jude's in Tennessee to do her PhD, moved to the Gladstone Institutes by UCSF for her postdoc, and then jumped to work for Life Technologies, where she was sort of an applications person, so developing applications and assays, and then made a logical career move to another tools company, Biorad, and then made the kind of unusual leap to go from sort of assay development and tool development to bench science, discovery research at a big pharmaceutical company. So it'd be interesting to find out how she did that. But once she was here, you can see how quickly she moved up into leadership roles, had to jump from company to company in order to do it, but it didn't take her long to achieve a leadership position. So find 10 more people like that and you'll start to see some trends about how long people stay in those careers. Another question might be, what transitional experience do I need to obtain a job as a medical science liaison? So these are people who represent a class of drugs. They're not salespeople. In fact, I think they're not allowed to report to the sales units. But they're experts on how a drug works in the body. Their clients tend to be doctors who ask questions about the drug mechanism, patient groups, other industry or academic researchers who help them answer questions. They answer questions about adverse events when a drug hurts someone. They're the ones that have to track down why that happened. So very interesting job, very still related to science, even though they're not at the bench. This is a UCI alum, Logan Roberts. He's an alum from here, yep. And so if you click through his career history, you'd see he did his PhD here, or did his bachelor's at UCLA, then a PhD here, and then moved to Eli Lilly in a global medical affairs position, and then became an MSL. I think this is a pretty common step where you jump into something that leads to MSL. One thing that I noticed about Logan is he did a lot of, for one thing, he has a really good LinkedIn profile. So if you're looking for LinkedIn profiles to emulate, I like his because it's very descriptive. But he did a lot of leadership activities. I can't remember if there's another page. If you read through his history, he did a lot of leadership activities, and that kind of work actually makes you more attractive for this particular kind of job. And so I bet if you look through a lot of people who have MSL roles, they did something. They're postdoc leaders or graduate student leaders on their campus, or taught, or did something, because these people do a lot of presentations. So you'd be able to start seeing some themes. Another question is that we get a lot is, I want to move into the business of science, but I don't know how to get there. And here's a really interesting example of someone who, Yasmin, she did her training at Indiana University and then Yale for postdoc, and then pretty typical move, finished her postdoc in 2014. It looks like she went pretty quickly to be probably a discovery scientist at Shire. And then really interesting move, after only 9 months, she jumped to this Guggenheim Partners firm. And that's an unusual career move for sure, to move straight from the bench to a business-related position that's a pretty sophisticated role. And so when I first saw this, I was like trying to track down her history. I was like, I bet Yasmin, I bet this is a tiny company, and they were, willing to hire entry-level people without much experience. So I looked up Guggenheim Partners, and it turns out they control like $60 billion or something. I'm like, okay, not a small firm. How did she do that? And if you look through her history, she did all these really challenging certifications for investment bankers and investment people. And I'm guessing that she did those during her training or during her time at Shire. And as soon as she got those, she was marketable for these kinds of roles. So again, you could spend some time looking through other people who have this job title. And all you have to do on LinkedIn is click on the people button and enter the search terms that you're looking for, like a job title, and you'll start being able to track down people who do what you want to do in the future. And then sort of as you go through this list of reading about careers, going to events at your institution, or when you go to a scientific society meeting, there's a career panel, start going to those. Getting out and talking to people, doing informational interviews or networking, or actually getting experience, doing an internship or some kind of a project, or take a course in the field that you want to move into. There's job simulations that you can do. I'll write up there's a website called Intersect that is job simulations for PhD scientists. So if you want to become an intellectual property attorney, you can go to this website. You can go to this website and actually spend a few hours doing a task that's typical. So if you just Google Intersect and Washington University, St. Louis, it's at that, you'll be able to link to that. They have a whole library of tasks that are typical of whatever that career path is. So that would give you a real good idea of what a typical task is. As you go down this list, you can see that as you want to learn about careers, these take more time as you go down the list, but you also learn a lot more, obviously. We talk to students who are like, I think I want to, go into science policy, and so I'm going to do a 3-month internship. And we're like, why don't you learn a little more about it first before you invest 3 months in it? So follow this list, and as you eliminate a career after spending a few minutes reading, look, you saved all that time from having to do other things and move on to the next career. We've been studying myIDP users. We've been doing some surveys and asking them what which of these activities are most useful, what resources they find most useful. And of a survey from 8,000 responses that we got, mostly PhD level trainees, we asked them, what resources did you use to explore careers and which ones were most helpful or not helpful? You can see the percent who used, the number one thing was we ask our peers. That's pretty interesting. We also ask our PIs about careers and other PIs. We tended to use career counselors, thank you very much, at our institutions. Didn't use career counselors who we have to pay. That's probably good in that case. And you can see so you can see how they used these different things. A fair number of people said we did go out and talk to professionals who are in those careers. And the most interesting thing from this study is that when we ask them about what was helpful or not helpful, this is a ratio of very helpful to not helpful. The thing that was super important and super useful was professionals in a career of interest. So going out and finding someone who did that thing that you want to do and finding out how they get there and talking to that person was like 40 times more useful than any other thing. Interesting, PIs, not that, this doesn't mean they weren't helpful. This means they were, multiple times, it was more helpful than not to talk to them. But if you look at those, we broke these out by careers. If somebody's going into an academic career, the PIs, of course, went way up in terms of helpfulness. But what we really want to do with this data is try to encourage people to take the time and the effort and the chance, even though it's uncomfortable, to get out there and do what we call informational interviews, which is finding someone who's in that career path of interest, making an appointment with them, and seeing how they got there. And you'll find that that's so much more useful and often leads to a job opportunity as well. So informational interviews, how many people have done one before? Just a few of you, some, good. So you make an appointment with someone who is doing that career that you want to. Go in with a list of questions. Don't try to get a job from it, just try to get information. It puts a whole different set of pressures on you, and you behave differently if you're like, I have to impress this person and get them to invite me to hire me. No, you're just trying to gather information to make that career decision. But it's always a good idea to ask them if they know anybody else you can talk to. Make sure you send thank you notes. And there's a whole tutorial on the myIDP website for how to do this. If you click on talk to people, and then some helpful things, there's a list, a sample correspondence. So how do you write that email to the person saying, will you talk to me? So there's some sample correspondence. There's also a list of questions. If you're like, what am I going to ask this person? Typical informational interview questions are, how did you get your job? What do you like about it? What are your typical tasks? Those are good questions. But try to build some questions around your values list as well, because those are the really useful things to find out from somebody who's in a career. Are you getting the same things out of your career that are most important to me? And if you click on that link, you'll get your top 8 values and then some suggested questions that you might ask. So pretty easy to build a script for your informational interviews through myIDP, sample correspondence. People ask us, okay, this sounds cool, but I don't actually know somebody who's a medical science liaison. How would I find those people? When we ask our students where they found them, they're like, actually, by the time I got through my indirect contacts, so I ask all the people in my lab and all the people I went to undergraduate with, something like that, people I know, I was usually able to find someone in that career path that could connect me with that person in that career I want to talk to. But also, if you're in your disciplinary society, join a professional organization so that you can get their list of members and start working with the professionals who are in that group. Just reaching out cold on LinkedIn can sometimes work. In fact, it works quite a bit. Talk to Harinder, see if he can connect you with somebody that he knows. I asked him a couple of questions, and pretty soon I got like 5 people who are doing this. So, I'm not going to go through this whole list because we'll pass out the slides, but the next 10 slides I have are a really deep tutorial on how to do informational interviews, from how to send an invitation, how to schedule the appointment, how to write a list of questions, how to behave in the interview, and then some sample thank you notes. So I think it's not actually useful to go through all these, but there's a lot of detailed samples on how to approach these people. because what we hear from our students is that it's really intimidating and daunting to try to think about doing this. And then when they got on the other side of it, they're like, that was so awesome, talking to someone who's done that before, so encouraging. So get out there and do it. You'll probably have to ask several people in order to get someone to say yes, but that's okay. And then we also have like scripts for how you open the conversation, because you can go in with your list of questions, but it's important to establish a professional connection with the person. So you want to make sure that you have your opening statement well crafted. And so I just wanted to wrap up with an example of how easy it is, although it's time consuming, easy and fun it is to find this kind of career information that's enough to help you make a decision. And so this is a true story about someone thinking about the career of field application scientist. This is like you're an expert in a piece of research equipment, and you're not a salesperson, but you solve problems around that piece of equipment, or you find new ways to use that piece of equipment for your users. And someone told him in his lab, hey, you'd be really good at this because you have a skill in a particular piece of equipment, and you seem like you have a really good outgoing personality. People would be comfortable talking to you. But he didn't know anything about this career. And so he came in to make an appointment, and this is sort of what he did. I sent him to myIDP, and there's a whole career category under supportive science-related products. You can see field application specialist. He went to myIDP and found an article and a book chapter about that field. If y'all haven't seen this book, it's super useful. Career Opportunities in Biotechnology and Drug Development, Toby Friedman. It's like an encyclopedia of job information for biotech careers, if that's the field you're thinking about. So he found the chapter in that book on this career path, and then he made another appointment, and these were his notes. He's like, just from less than an hour of work, I've been able to see that these people do a lot of presentations. They go to technical seminars and go to visit campuses and conferences. They do a lot of training. They're considered an expert in this product, and he thought that would be rewarding for him. They do a lot of troubleshooting. They're not at the actual bench doing research, but they're helping with a lot of setups and advising on how to do research. And he learned that it's a great stepping stone. So a lot of people spend a few years in this career and they jump to a new like business development or product management. Lots of jobs, and the salary's good. So sounds pretty good. He said, I want to learn a little bit more, so I'm going to go talk to someone now. And he ended up shadowing someone who was a field application scientist and doing some informational interviews with a couple of field application scientists. And he found some good and bad. He was afraid that he was going to have to travel a lot. But the more he talked to people and the more he actually did some shadowing and practiced some of the tasks involved in that job, he found that if you represent pieces of equipment that are expensive enough and commonly used enough, you may not have to travel at all. But other times, you might have to be on the road at all. So it helped him really narrow down his job search. He ended up finding a job that was that thing that he wanted, which was not a lot of travel. And he's still in this role, and he's really happy with it. So, he's probably spent 6 hours or less total doing all these tasks, and was able to make a decision to pursue that career. So back to this list, before I give you a quick assignment. This part takes a lot of time, but learning about yourself, starting with a list of career options, eliminating the ones that don't fit your skills, values, and interests because you've learned enough about those to make that decision, and then iterating through this process until you start narrowing down on a career that does fit, seems to be how this process works. The next time we meet, I hope you all come back for the November 14th workshop. We're going to move on to this other section, which is goal setting. And you may not have a career decision made, but we'll practice the goals and action items that actually turn into an IDP. What I'd like for you to do, to think about doing before November 14th, is spend some time going through the LinkedIn or the myIDP reading. Do some LinkedIn searches on people that you think you might want to be like based on on job titles. Read 20 to 30 job postings. So I'm thinking about being, international science policy person. Put in those 3 words, international science policy, in the people search, and see what you get for job postings or LinkedIn profiles. And then I have this list we call a people, titles, and organizations list. And this is something that our trainees seem to find super useful. Is once they have an idea about some careers they're thinking about, thank you, come up with a list of 10 people, 10 titles, and 10 organizations that are related to that career path that you think you might want to learn more about, and start looking for the themes. So find a list of 6 to 10 people who are in that same general career path that you're thinking about, and then describe those things and look for themes. So did those people tend to do some sort of transitional training? So did they take more courses? If so, what were they? What job types or job titles were between what they're doing now and their PhD or their postdoc? What organizations and groups are they following? So if you look through someone's profile, you'll see what organizations or groups they're members of or they're following. See if you can join those groups. And then what skills or qualifications are you missing that they all seem to have? And then we'll start working on IDPs next time based on some of these answers. What I'll say from doing this workshop at my own campus, sometimes people are like, I didn't do all the homework, so I'm not coming to the next workshop. It's okay. The next workshop will also be useful if you didn't do the homework. It'll just be more useful if you come back with this sheet sort of filled out or have some ideas about that. Does that make sense? Okay, great. You guys have been awesome. Thank you for your time. I hope to see you all on November 14th, and good luck with your homework. So, thanks.